welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Our show, Cryptid Studies Institute Radio, is ready to go. Tonight, we have a very special guest scheduled for you, Mr. Jason Weaver. Now, as far as I know, Jason doesn't host a group or anything of that nature, but he has a fascinating story to tell, something that happened to him as a child. And I think you're really going to like what he has to say. As ever with me is my son and co-host, Elijah Henderson.
Hello, how are y'all doing?
It has been a long week. I am glad to finally be here, getting things on the air. How are you tonight, son?
Well, I reckon I'm doing finer than frog hair. Thank you for asking.
Well, if it's as fine as frog hair, it don't get much better.
I must be doing pretty good, I reckon.
Yes, I think so.
How's your week been?
Not without its challenges. Now, should you hear a ruckus or a commotion in the background, I've come outside, and my dog's going to start hollering out here. My daughter's going to have to come get her dog because I wanted to sit outside while we do the show tonight because when I was coming down the hill earlier, Gabriel, come get your dog. When I was coming down the hill earlier, I don't know what I heard. I was looking at some deer off in the woods, and then off in the distance, I heard what's, I don't know, sound like roaring or a banshee. I don't even know what a banshee would actually sound like, but that's where my mind went when I heard it. And I was hoping we might hear it again out here while I'm sitting here. So
hopefully so. I wish I could have heard that, but unfortunately I didn't hear it coming down the hill.
I wish you could have too. I wish you had heard it as well, son. That way you might have been able to help me pinpoint it.
Well, I was listening to the soothing sounds of Nat King Cole through my headphones.
Well,
so I wouldn't have heard it anyway.
I guess when we get home here, we're going to have to start taking all headphones off and start listening to our surroundings around us. Because it's the spring of the year, and that's usually when activity around here kicks into high gear.
And I hope to try to sit out a lot more often and listen for things since it is starting to pick up a little bit.
It makes it hard with a 50-plus hour work week, doesn't it, son?
A little bit. Well, without further ado, would we like to welcome Jason on?
Well, in just a moment, we would like to welcome Jason. Well, go ahead. Welcome, Jason. We'll talk to him about it.
All right, I'm bringing him on. Jason, brother, can you hear us?
I can. What's going on, fellers?
What's
Not
going
a
on?
whole lot, man. It's been a couple of years since we saw you.
Yes, it has.
I believe last place we saw you was at Walker Stalker, Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
That was a good con.
Will you be going back this year?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm planning to go this year, too, I think.
I'm kicking around the idea. So, Jason, have you been doing any hunting or researching lately?
No, I haven't. Not as much as I'd like to. I live about, I don't know. I guess you know I moved to Georgia. Elijah, I don't know if you were aware of this, but your father and Nathan Davis they were. I've done a few of these interviews, but they were my first interview, and that was
really
got to be 10 years. What, isn't it, Johnny?
Oh, that's awesome.
10 years.
It's about, I think, actually about 9.
9 years,
possibly 10,
something like that.
But it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Tell Elijah, you had a really interesting story, to tell, and I said you'd like to hear that. We ought to try to get Jason back on the show.
Yeah, that sounds great. I've had a lot of other things happen since then, and you know how it is with this subject. The more you learn, the less you know, it seems. And I've had a lot of aha moments, and I've had a lot of what the heck moments, So it is what it is. I'm a lot more at ease today with the subject than I was when I first started coming out about it, 9-10 years ago. I still don't know what these things are. I still don't
I don't
understand them. No, I like to think I understand, or I'd like to think I kind of do, but just when you think you do, you find out you're you're totally misconstrued, of course. But yeah, I moved to Georgia in 2013, and I live about between a quarter and a half mile away from the Chattahoochee, and I actually live next to a subdivision that butts up right against a WMA, or wildlife management area. So, and I've not been disappointed since I've been here. I go down there. I try to get down there at least twice a year. Once in the spring before it gets too hot and the ticks get too bad, and once in the fall when the leaves are off the trees and the eye shot's a little bit better. But I've not been disappointed. The Chattahoochee is definitely it's a Bigfoot hotspot, Bigfoot highway, and so I'm fortunate enough to live, like I said, less than a half a mile away, and I've discovered some things down there. I've discovered some things about a whole lot of things since I moved to Georgia. So I've been I've interviewed, I think, once or twice since I've moved to Georgia, but what I've talked about on my other interviews was just basically I won't say the tip of the iceberg, but it was just part of what I've experienced. I'm not saying I've experienced a whole lot more, but I've had an interesting few years. I'll be honest with you about that. It's been interesting.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Now, I'm going to plug you for a minute here. People that don't know Jason is actually a really awesome musician. Now, you still play your guitar and sing a lot?
Yeah, I sure do. In fact, that's what I've been doing today is I finally got my recording studio set up in my house so I can maybe focus on a little bit more writing. I do a lot of cover tunes, but I don't do a lot of my own, so I'm going to start focusing on writing. I have aspirations of writing a famous song. I don't want to be famous. I just want to write a famous song, you know. But yeah,
now when are you going to write us something in the industry, a really awesome Bigfoot or cryptid song? There's not a lot of those around. You need to be putting us one.
I do. You're right. I should. I like dark songs too. It should be pretty simple to do. Because they're mysterious and I won't say they're evil. I don't know what they are really. I think they're like people in a lot of ways. I think there's good ones and bad ones, and
oh yeah,
so it goes. But yeah, I do need to write me a cryptid song. That's a good idea. I actually went to Expedition Bigfoot Museum yesterday to catch Lyle Blackburn. I don't know if you guys know Lyle
cool.
Blackburn.
Oh, I've not met Lyle yet, but he is definitely on my crypto bucket list.
Yeah. Well, he's a super guy. I met him at Ohio Bigfoot Conference a couple years ago, and we struck up a friendship. And so he came to give a lecture at the Bigfoot Museum in Ellijay or Cherry Log up there at Blue Ridge, and so I went up there for a few hours yesterday, and then I knew I was looking forward to the interview today. So it's. And ironically enough, about 30 minutes ago, before I called you, there was a television show on that my girls are watching, and the word Sasquatch dropped on the television show. I don't know if you all have noticed the impact Sasquatch has had on the media and advertising and television programming, but it's interesting to sit back and watch this because, as I stated, when I first started talking about this in 2009, prior to that, I clammed up for about 30 years. So, and you didn't really hear too much about such things, and now we're inundated.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's a I don't know if it's a disclosure of some type, but it's interesting to see the subject cresting and breaking through on, like I said, television shows and commercials and God knows what else.
It seems very marketable right now.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yep,
now,
very
Jason,
interesting how things work.
You've been always into the Bigfoot Sasquatch research. Have you taken a swing at the Dogman lore and legend yet?
No, I haven't. I have some friends in Kentucky that are firsthand, right on the tip of the sword as far as the dogman investigations. I'll be honest with you. I got into this subject to get over a fear. I had an incident happen when I was a kid that kind of impacted me in a pseudo negative way. I can't say it's completely negative because it's led me to meet great people like you guys, but it's just, I don't know. I've come a long way with this, and but I still have the fear, and the thought of dogmen terrifies me. I'm not going to lie, it terrifies me. So I haven't given
they're
it
scary.
much. They are scary, and I have, like I said, I have friends that research them and interact with them, and they say that they're a lot more aggressive. They're a little bit different than the Sasquatch, and but he says once you get past that, they're very much like them as far as the interaction you can have that's on a friendly level. But they say that about bears too. So I don't know. I haven't, Johnny. I don't. The dogmen kind of spook me. Be quite frank.
I hear that from several people. A lot of people is like, that's something you don't want to mess with.
Well,
now,
what I find interesting is that these creatures of lore, you and I have talked about this before. The Bigfoot, the Dogman, the Mothman, what's the giant Thunderbirds? I mean, these things are being seen, and with the impact of the World Wide Web, people are becoming connected, and people are getting to talk about it more. So it's nice. I'm excited about it, and like I said, I'm scared too. I got into this as on a face your fears, live your dreams sort of thing, and I have definitely faced my fear. I still have it. It's still alive and well, but it's not as controlling over my life anymore. I've realized that I can take it by the horns, and when I do this, the growth is amazing. So that's where I'm at, I guess. I'm growing.
Well, awesome. Now, for everybody who doesn't know, and Elijah, you're one of them, Jason, can you tell us a little bit about your early experience with it, the event that you've been kind of intimating about?
Yeah, sure. I had just to give you a little bit of a preface to my to my story. I haven't always lived in the South. I don't know if you can tell by my accent, but I have a bit of Yankee in me. I grew up in northern New York. I grew up about 30 miles south of the Canadian border in a little community known as Sackett's Harbor, New York. It's right on Lake Ontario. Sackett's Harbor is like history's best kept secret is how I used to describe it growing up there. It's amazing how many things have happened there, what Sackett's has been a part of over the years. And I found out after I got into this subject on a serious level, where I really dove into it, I found out that my hometown was actually the spot the town where the very first wild man encounter ever printed in an American newspaper occurred. And it was in the early 1800s, 1820s, where and you can find this on the BFRO website. Look under Jefferson County, New York. I believe it's the only sighting there. It's not the only sighting or encounter that's occurred in Jefferson County, because I'm proof of that. But it's that's kind of interesting. And so to get back to what I was talking about, I grew up in a rural community, mostly farmers. We had a dairy farm in another town, and so I grew up at a very young age. I learned all about work, hauling buckets and feeding chickens and all that kind of stuff. And then my father's health took a turn for the worse and for the bad, and we ended up selling our farm, and we bought my grandparents' farm, which was just outside of this town of Sackett's Harbor, and it was a small farm. It was more of a hobby farm. My grandfather had built a pig barn there, kind of a lean-to barn, but it was enclosed with windows and doors and that kind of thing, concrete floors and gutters and stanchions for cattle, and you could hold about probably about a dozen cows or so in there, and a few calves and that kind of thing. It was a pretty good sized barn, but we had grazing beef, I guess is what you'd call it. We raised beef cattle for our freezer, and we had a milk cow every once in a while, a couple of heifers and a horse and chickens, geese, ducks, and then I raised guinea pigs and rabbits and that kind of thing. And it was just, farm living, so to speak. And, I grew up with hardworking folks. My parents were Depression-era kids, born in the 30s. And so hard work was a part of it. We played too, but we worked hard, and we worked every day. And me being the youngest kid, when we moved to my grandparents' farm, the dairy business didn't happen as much as it did prior. We didn't have to milk cows every day and that kind of thing, but we had to feed the cows and take care of them. We had a couple of pastures off the barn. We had one pasture that went to the left of the entrance of the barn, and we had one that went to the right, and then we had a fence row that went right down the middle of them. And we would let the cows graze on one side and let my horse graze on the other, because we had a horse and he wasn't good to other livestock. He's kind of mean, so we used to have to let him graze by himself. And when he would work down his area, what I did is I had him on a long lead, probably 20 or 30 feet long, with a old tractor tire to anchor him down. And so he would graze in a circle. And when he had worked out a spot down, I would move the tire, and he would graze another. And then when he'd graze it down, or the cows would graze down their pasture, we would swap them out, and so on. We kept our cows in the pasture. We had a single, on the left side of the left side pasture, we had a single strand of electric fence that went around the whole pasture. We never had trouble with cows getting out or anything like that, or rarely. I won't say it didn't happen, but it was rare to happen. And so that's kind of how it went along. And like I said, I was the youngest in my family. I didn't have a lot of friends on my road to play with, and my brother and sister are both 5 or 6 years older than me, and they had their friends, but they wasn't really too keen for a little kid like me to pal around with them, so I had to play by myself a lot, and that's what I did. And so as I said, we moved to the farm, my grandparents' farm, when I was 4, and life went on, and I ended up, my mother's brother, he had property on the same road. It was used to be nobody but family lived on this road. So my uncle had some property there, and he had married my aunt. She's my step aunt, and they have some kids and a couple of kids, and so the summer of 80, I guess it was 81. Well, here, let me back up a little bit. The summer before, we had some incidents with our cattle getting harassed or spooked or whatever you want to call it. We'd hear them making noise and running around in the pasture at night, and we'd run down there. This was in the summertime. We'd run down there with flashlights, but we couldn't see anything. So we just assumed that it was maybe coyotes, or what we call coy dogs, which are kind of a coyote wild dog hybrid. We used to have a lot of those around. So we figured maybe it was just dogs harassing
what time frame was this, Jason?
I'm sorry?
What time frame was this? What decade?
Oh, this is in the 80s. This is 1981.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, well, 80,
the world was
81,
a lot
82.
different than that for all the young people out there. The world you see today is not the world that Jason and I grew up in. It was much more rural.
Absolutely. We got maybe 4 or 5 channels on the television if it was a clear day. In the wintertime, it was clear and cold up there, so we'd get 2 or 3 more. We'd get some Canadian stations and some Rochester, New York stations, so I kind of liked the TV time in the wintertime. But, but yeah, it, like Johnny said, it was a different time. We had one phone in the house with a 50-foot cord, and we followed it. If you needed the phone, usually you'd have to follow the cord to the closet where my sister was sitting, talking to her boyfriend, or, that kind of thing. No cell phone.
Oh, my goodness.
Closest thing to cell phones we had were CBs. Everybody had a CB, But so in the summer of 1980, these cows were getting harassed, and they happened to bust through the fence. We had, like I said, maybe 10 or 12 head of cattle at the time, and 4 or 5 of them had gotten out and wandered into the woods. So our parents said, got to get down there and scoop up them cattle and get them back in the field, and or back in the pasture. So it was me and my brother and a couple of my brother's friends, and I actually had a couple of friends that lived a couple of miles down the road, and they happened to be at my house at the time. And so here goes 6 boys. My brother was in his teens, so he was probably 16 or 17, and his 2 buddies were around that age, and then my 2 buddies were around my age. And so we walked down in the woods to look for these cows. Now, the pasture, it butted up against this section of forest that went on for probably 3 or 4 or 5 miles. It was pretty deep, very thick, a lot of swamps, a lot of big black walnut knolls and pine knolls, lots of deer, lots of fresh water, lots of springs on the property, and just a real rich place. Lots of game. And so but we were very comfortable. We played in the woods, and my dad, we harvested firewood. Not only did we burn wood, but we also sold wood. That's part of a subsidized income. My folks sold wood, and so we were in the woods a lot. And you got used to it. I used to play in the woods by myself, all that. So to go get cows in the woods, the worst part of it was getting the cows, because cows, they run in a straight line, and they're kind of dumb. They don't stop. They go through fences and that kind of thing. So we go down into the woods, and as we find a cow, we each took a handful of baling twine, and we'd make makeshift nooses or harnesses, and take the cows back up the hill and put them in the pasture, because the woods go down into a hill, the woods. There's a hill from our barn that went into the woods, and that's what I'm saying. We'd have to walk up the hill to get the cows back to the pasture. But anyway, we're finding the cows as we're going along, and we were missing one, and we couldn't find it. And so my brother and one of his buddies decided they're going to go to a part of the woods that we hadn't searched yet, and they said that if we find the cow, we'll give a holler. So in the meantime, they wandered off, and we're still looking for the other cow, and we found it, actually. So a couple of us that had stayed back, a couple of guys put some baling twine on this cow and hauled him back up to the barn. Well, myself and one of my buddies were sitting there waiting for my brother, and we hear this racket in the woods and all sorts of commotion, and I see my brother and his friend running like their tails were on fire through the woods, and I could see them swatting briars and sticks or branches and whatnot out of their way, and they are booking it. And my brother he's older than me, and my brother was like my hero. My brother was cool to me as a kid, and so anytime my brother told me to do something, I did it. And his nickname for me as a kid was Charlie. He called me Charlie since I was real little. He said I looked like Charlie Brown when I was little because I had real light blonde hair, and I almost looked bald. So he called me Charlie Brown. So my brother yells out, and you could hear the stress in his voice. I'll never forget it. He goes, "Charlie, run." So I did what my brother said. I jumped up, and we all booked it up the hill, 4 of us. We get up to the barn where the other guys were after they'd put the cow in the field. Some time had passed, obviously. We get up there to the barn, and we're all catching our breath and laughing and getting our composure together, or whatever you want to call it. And one of my brother's friends says to my brother, "What are we running from?" And my brother says, "We saw big monkey people," is how he described them. He said, "We saw monkey people, and one of them chased us." Well, my brother,
plural then, not just ridicule.
One. Not one. Monkey people is how he put it. So
wow.
His friend started laughing and razzing him a bit. Oh, my brother's name's Jack. Jack thinks he saw a Bigfoot. And my brother kind of snickered half-heartedly, but you could tell my brother wasn't humorous. He wasn't joking. You could see it on his face that he had truly. My brother told me once, there's only 2 things I'm afraid of in the world. He said, our mother and Bigfoot. And my brother was afraid. I could see it. And So, time passes. You kind of blow things off, and we had another incident we had right around the same time as we had one of our calves had come up missing, and we found it. Oh, I don't know, 100 acres or 100 yards or better into the woods with we found its carcass or its torso, and it had at least one back leg broken. I think there was two broken, but the creepiest thing about it was the calf's head had been twisted and torn right off its body. And, even though it was a small calf, it was just a few weeks old. If you've ever been around any kind of cattle, even a calf has a lot of muscle in their neck. There was no way a coyote or a wolf, there's no way. This thing was twisted.
Was the head
right
still
off.
around there somewhere, or was
No.
it missing altogether?
It was missing altogether. Never did find the head. We found the body. We go to our parents about it. Now we found this. I can't remember if it was before or after. I believe it was before my brother had his run-in with the monkey people, as he put it. But we had that happen, and I had like I said, I raised geese and guinea pigs, and something was taking my guinea pigs and rabbits out of their hutches, and it was upsetting me because I thought, well, my parents said, well, maybe one of the guys, because I'd go down every day and there'd be another one missing or two missing or whatever, And I was kind of I'm still a soft-hearted guy. I still like animals, and I always have liked animals. But I thought something was either hurting my animals or trying to scare me, and I didn't like it. And the interesting thing about the hutch is it was this type of a rabbit hutch that had the door on the top. And the only way, what it did is it had those little latches, that like a little bolt that you put on your door where you lift up the little notch, you slide it over, and you drop it into the little notch, and it locks. Well, that's kind of what these had on the door, and they were broken. So I just fashioned some dowels or took some sticks and had whittled them down and had made my own little bolts out of them. Because if you didn't put something in there, the rabbits could just lift their head up and pop the door open and get out. So I had to put it in there. And whatever was taking my rabbits, pardon me, had to have fingers to take those things out. So, like we assumed, it was, I thought it was the neighbor kids messing with me. But then we started finding the carcasses, the little rabbit and guinea pig carcasses in weird areas, like on the barn roof. Like, how this barn was built. Like I said, it was a lean-to pig barn. So at the low end.
Now, were they
roof,
eaten or just killed?
Oh, kind of both. It's like the little, its little paws or legs or feet, whatever you want to call them, would be chewed off. A head would be twisted up. It was just, I find them in all different forms of and shapes of
mutilation.
Mutilation, eaten or whatever. And, could have been birds done that. We had hawks and, that kind of thing around, but I don't know how they got them out of the hutches, which is the weirdest part. But I also had a white goose that come up missing, and we found it in the notch of a tree, like, 8-10 feet off the ground, and its head had been ripped off, the neck had been ripped off, all the breast feathers had been pulled, and it was bloody, and, it obviously had been chewed on. But it was like it was just shoved up into the notch of this tree, like somebody put it there to grab it later or something. I don't know. Again, this is all speculation. But so we had these things happening, and my parents were doing the best they could to explain it. They said dogs, maybe chicken hawks are getting I don't know, who knows. So we just it's out in the country. And you see wildlife and animals get killed. It is what happens sometimes, So we just kind of, you don't think anything really, you know what I'm saying? So if we fast forward to the next summer, and as I said, my aunt and uncle had married, and I gained a new cousin. And my cousin, he was a couple of years younger than me, and he was kind of a bit of a goofy-looking kid. He had blonde curly hair and real thick glasses, and he was, he was kind of a weird kid, but we got along. He and I became friends. We didn't grow up together, so we became buddies, I guess, and over the course of that summer. And this one particular part of the summer, it was berry picking time, and so we made plans to go pick berries. And so we get our little parquet margarine bowls from our parents, and or our moms, and Cool Whip bowls, because those blackberries will stain the bottom of good bowls, So we would take our bowls down. And how it worked is this road that I lived on is a dead end road, but the road actually continued. Once it hit the top of the hill, it would dead end, but there was a tractor road that continued for, 2 or 3 miles. That road would go to the next farm on the other side of the swamp or the woods. So, we'd have traffic go down there occasionally. There was a beekeeper that kept some beehives down there, and so, but very rarely was there anybody ever down there that wasn't family or wasn't part of the farm crew that worked the farm, because they used to cut through that road to bale hay and some pastures off of this road and that kind of thing. So we used to take the road down, and what you do is you take the tractor road down, and then it would cut to the right we had a little side road that would cut to the right, and we would drive down to this meadow, and there was we used to harvest wood out of there, like I said, firewood and stuff, and so we used to go down that way to get to this meadow. But my cousin Jerry and I, we happened to, when we came out his door of his house, he's like, let's go this way, because we had built kind of a little fort in the trees right on the edge of these woods. So we cut through the woods, and we had a well house down next to this meadow. As I said, we're out in the country, and we had well water, and we had spring water, but the well house was at the bottom of the hill, and we had power lines that would run from the bottom of the hill, from the pump house up to our house to a circuit breaker, so we could run the pump and that kind of thing. And there was a little cutaway or a clear cut under these power lines. This was all that we had built as a family, or as a, for the farm. And so we cut down through there and to get to this meadow. So we kind of went down a way that, we normally wouldn't have gone that way. We normally take the regular trail, but we decided we were going to be adventurous and cut through. So we cut down into this meadow, and this meadow is overgrown now. It's about, I don't know, it's probably a third the size it used to be. I was down there a few years ago, but anyways, you come into this meadow, and there was a big, huge berry thicket. There was blackberries. We call them black caps up there because they're like little skull caps or toboggans. So we had black caps on one end of it, and then we had a great big raspberry thicket as well, or raspberry bush. So we used to go down there and pick all sorts of blackberries. Blackberries are bigger than my thumb as a kid. I mean, just great big, huge berries.
Wow.
Yeah, and
so there was a
we
wide
used to go down there
variety.
and. Oh yeah, it was. I mean, I'm telling you, it's a mecca. It's a mecca for these things, in retrospect.
Oh my goodness.
So, but we ended up going down there, and we were picking berries. And I get a little emotional this part, so if you pardon me as I light up a cigarette, because I get my body starts to do all sorts of weird things. I have to kind of compose myself. But
oh, you're good.
We went down there, and I don't know if you guys have ever gone berry picking, but the berry thickets, they grow out, and then they kind of like cove in, and then they come back out, that kind of thing, the way they grow. And what was going on is my cousin Jerry was picking on one outcropping, and I was picking on another, and there was a little cove area that went between the two of us. And when you're picking berries as a kid, it's like two in the mouth, one in the bowl, two in the mouth, one in the bowl. So we're picking and eating and having fun, and it's a beautiful summer day, and we have not a care in the world. And so we're moving along this berry bush, and we're picking berries, as I said. And my cousin kind of went into a bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of a meltdown, where he starts going, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, just over and over, crying, whining, whimpering, I want to go home. And finally, something triggered it. He dropped his berry bowl, and he was to my left. So he's picking to my left, and when he dropped his bowl, he made a mad dash towards me, ran behind me, caught the trail back up to the tractor road, and he hightailed it home. Something scared him. And as I said, I didn't really know him that well. I thought he was a bit of a weird kid, thought he was a bit of a, what we used to call blat baby. So he was, he was blatting, as we called it, crying. Gosh, what a little blat baby. And so I was picking along, and, a few minutes went by. I don't know how long. I speculate again. You don't really pay much attention to time when you're a kid. You don't pay attention, but I'm going to say maybe 15 to 30 minutes had passed since Jerry had melted down and run off, and I heard a whistle to my right, from the direction that he had ran, and it was a real loud, like that, really loud, enough to catch my attention. And so I'm looking, and I don't see anything, and I'm like, knock it off, Jerry. I know that's you, thinking it was Jerry messing with me or whatever. I go back to picking the berries, and if you've ever picked blackberries, you know that, when you're picking blackberries, you'll see a little cluster of them. Some of them are ripe and some of them aren't. And when you reach in there to your hand and you pull down on the berries, when they're ripe, they'll just fall into the palm of your hand. If they're not ripe, they don't fall. And so as you're picking the blackberries, you got your hands on the berries, but your eyes are on the next cluster, because you want to get the berries. You want to know where you're moving. Another thing you're looking for is they're animals, that's what I'm always looking for, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But so that's what I'm doing. I'm picking, and I'm looking at the next cluster, and as I said, I heard this whistle, and a few minutes passes, and I hear this whistle again. So I'm left-handed, so I'm holding the bowl in my right hand, and I'm picking with my left. And when I heard that whistle, I look over my right shoulder, and to see what it is that's whistling at me, and as I was looking, I was reaching my hand into the berry thicket. So I reached in and I touch hair. I feel hair. And so I immediately pull my hand back and look, because as I mentioned earlier, I've touched snakes sunning themselves, and I've touched birds. I've put my hands right in the bird nests before. And so when you're picking, you kind of look, because number one, you don't want to touch an animal, but number two, those briars on those blackberry vines, they'll cut you up pretty good if you don't maneuver your hand in there right. So when I touched this hair, I drew my hand back immediately, and I stepped back away from the bush. Now I'm about, I don't know, again, I'm speculating, but I've got to be, 7-8 feet away from the bush, and I see this black figure in the bushes, and I see it, but I can't really see it. So as I'm looking, I'm leaning to my left to look around this berry thicket, and he's kind of squatted down in the berries in the thicket. And every time I would shift to the left, he would shift to the left, and or she, whatever it was, when stick its face further into because I couldn't. What it was is I was trying to look at it from my perspective. I couldn't discern what it was. Couldn't figure out the shape of it. And I mean, part of it looked like the back end of a deer, and then another, but it was too dark for a deer. And so my mind is trying to sit here and rationalize what it is I'm looking at. And I happen to look down, and I see it's I could see where it was squatting, and I saw the outside 3 toes on the outside of its right foot. So I saw the toes, and then I saw the ankle bone, and then I followed up the ankle bone and saw the calf, where the calf and the thigh were squeezing together, and then I saw the top of the thigh, and then I see its shoulder, and it's muscular and it's cut, and I get up to its neck, and I can see the back of its head, but I can't see. It doesn't look like there's a neck there really. And when I realize that I'm seeing, people toes, I immediately start to break down. I start to get emotional. I start all the wind, all the air in my lungs leaves my body. I felt like I was being squeezed like an accordion. That's how I describe it, like an accordion squeeze. And I wet my pants, and I can't breathe, and I can't move, and I'm just standing there, and I'm in awe. I'm in shock, and I don't know what to do, and I can't move. And I'm an 11-year-old kid, 10, 11 years old, and so I finally, I mustered up some fight or flight mechanism somewhere, and I dropped my bowl, and I ran home, and I told my folks, I saw a monster, I saw a Bigfoot, I saw a monster, and as I mentioned earlier, my parents were pragmatic. They grew up during the Depression and World War II. Their idea of monsters is hunger and Hitler, So
right,
sit there and try to describe a beast that's, you know, I don't know how tall it was. It's big, you know. It wasn't real bulky, but he was cut. He was built like a basketball player. It's the only way I can describe it.
Wow.
Built like a black basketball player, thin, but lanky, and I mean, when I say thin, I mean like he wasn't built like a professional wrestler. He was built like a professional basketball player. And what I could see, and when I ran home and told my folks what I saw, they were saying that you saw a dog, you saw a deer, maybe you saw a bear. Bears are rare. They have bears in northern New York, but they're very rare. But you know, as I've said before, I was a smart little kid, and you know, I love comic books. Johnny, that's something you and I have in common. You know that. I love comic books.
Oh, yes, I do.
And I love, you know, I'm an artist. I love to draw and paint and that kind of thing. And I used to sit down and sketch comic book covers. You know, I knew a lot about anatomy. I knew how you know, muscular men or muscular humans were built. I knew about foreshortening and perspective and all that stuff. And I knew what I saw was a two-legged something. I knew that it, you know, like I've said before, it's kind of like finding out King Kong lives in your backyard. You know, I mean, it was that kind of, you know, that kind of reality. It hit me in the head. And
I'm gonna be honest, Jason. You know, I'm surprised you're as well adjusted as you are after an experience like that.
Well, it took a while, my friend. You know, if you could see me in my 20s, you'd understand how I got to be as adjusted as I am. You know, it wasn't always like that. I didn't, you know, I don't blame this. Well, I'll get to that here in a minute. But what I was going to tell you was I started having nightmares about this thing. And every night I'd have, or it felt like every night, I had it a lot, of a Bigfoot living in my house, where my house was. My house was, you know, in one spot, and then there was a grove of trees, like a little wooded area. I wouldn't call it woods, but it was a little wooded area, maybe 20, 30 feet wide. And then my grandparents' house. And in my dreams, the Bigfoot lives in those trees, and I'm trying to get to my grandparents' house. And every time I try to walk to my grandparents' house, it comes out of the trees and wants to eat me. And you think I'm a 49-year-old man now. I don't have the dream as often as I used to, but I still have it, and it still terrifies me. And even though my experience and my encounter with this creature, it wasn't at all threatening or terrifying or you know, monster-like in any stretch of the word. I think it was just as scared of me as I was of it, to be honest with you. And you know, every time I'd like to, you know, try to look at it, or when I was trying to figure out what it was before I realized what it was almost as if it was hiding its face from me because it didn't want to scare me in retrospect. And again, I'm just speculating a lot of this. You know, I've had 30 plus years to think about it. But so I carried on this nightmare, and my mother would, you know, I'd come into my room yelling, and my mom would be like, "What's wrong?" And I'd say, "Bigfoot." And my mother would say, "You've got to stop this nonsense. You're going to drive yourself crazy." And so, you know, it kind of went on, but it still hindered me. And, you know, as I said,
hey, Jason, we've got somebody calling in that apparently wants to talk to you.
Okay, we're bringing them on right now.
Are you there?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jason Acey.
Hey, Jason.
What's going on?
Jason Weaver, you're on with Jason Acey.
Hey, Jason, good to meet you, man.
How are you doing, Mr. Weaver?
Oh, I'm doing all right, I guess. How are you?
Good. I do have one question for you. So your cousin that saw that he ran off scared, did he ever say what he saw? Did he collaborate the story in any way? Did he see the same thing you saw?
Yeah, we haven't talked about it much. We brought it up. Like I said, we lived in the neighborhood next door to each other until I graduated high school. He was a couple years younger than me, and he and I were you know, we kind of raised hell a lot together in our teen years. I'll put it that way. We used to ride three-wheelers and four-wheelers and go out in the woods and smoke cigarettes and, you know, away from our folks, so our folks didn't know we were smoking and that kind of thing. And On one of those, let's sneak off in the woods and smoke cigarettes trips, we talked about it. It was very brief. He was bothered by it, and to this day, I think he still is. I can't get a hold of him. He's been in and out of trouble. He's kind of a guest of the state he lives in. He's not allowed to leave the state, and generally speaking, he doesn't have, he struggles. He's got his demons. He struggles, and I don't know if it's because I did too. I've had my I had my issues too, and that's what I was going to say. I interrupted myself earlier. I was going to say that dealing with this kind of stuff, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee things, and when I went on with my life after this, as a kid, I said we harvest firewood, and every time my dad would say we got to cut firewood, I hated it because I knew he and I were going to have a conflict because I wasn't going back down there, and it would be a big, it was a big tug of war on getting me to go there. And finally, he told me I could go if I stayed by the truck. My dad knew that I was scared, but he didn't know what I was scared about, even though I had said Bigfoot. He didn't think it was that. My brother accidentally dropped a tree on me once. He didn't hurt me or anything, but the very top of the tree knocked me down as a kid. And my brother really caught a lot of flack from my dad over that. He really got in trouble over that. And so I think my dad might have thought that maybe my brother dropping that tree on me was what kept me from the woods. But my job was to pile brush. When they would cut the limbs and stuff off the trees before they chunked it up for firewood, I was to pull the branches away and pile them, and because we would burn those
I've done
or whatever.
that many times.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. So we'd go down there. We'd cut wood all year round. So it'd be down there in the wintertime stomping around in 4 foot, 5 foot snow. It was tough. And as I said, with this added fear of what lives there, I would move brush real quick, and then I'd run my tail back over to the truck and stand by the truck because I had a false sense of security that maybe if I jump in the truck quick enough, they won't get me. Kind of like taking a tent camping. Like you got a false sense of security. The tent will keep me safe. Well, that's kind of what I kind of looked at things. So, we ended up in '82. My father died in June of '82. So from about, I guess this happened around July of '81, my encounter, and then all those months leading up to my dad's death wasn't a long time. And so my dad died, and my mom and my dad, they knew each other from, they were married 28 years before he died, and they actually knew each other since like the first grade. So my mother grieved my dad terribly. I won't say she lost it, but my mom kind of dropped out for a while. She kind of just, she grieved. So I had to learn to let go of childish things, so to speak. I had to grow up. So I learned to become tight-lipped and didn't talk about this anymore to anybody, not even my brother. My brother even told me I wasn't allowed to bring it up to him, that kind of thing. So, you fast forward, and what I was going to tell you is that, I developed in my late teens. I went to college, and I developed a taste for alcohol and drugs, and I started drinking heavily, and I started doing drugs and getting right out there. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming Bigfoot for all the bad stuff, all the bad choices I made in my life, because that's not at all what it is. But how I dealt with things on an emotional level was 100% impacted by this encounter, because, I knew what I saw. And, and I don't blame my parents. I don't hold grudges against my folks, but, you go to your parents for protection and for truth, and you want them to believe you. And it didn't happen. And so, my way of dealing with things on an emotional level, it became, I'll just drink it and stuff it, or I'll do some drugs and stuff it. And, whatever you want, don't matter to me. I got involved in the nightclub industry and the comedy club circuit. I started emceeing for a chain of comedy clubs and traveling and drinking. And, a lot of these big name comedians, today, I used to work with them. I used to go on the road with them. And I used to catch the flack about Bigfoot and, all that stuff. But it was one of those things where it was like, Ha, ha, ha. He still believes in Santa Claus. You believe that? You know, it's kind of like that thing where, you know, people will poke at you thinking how silly you are, and then they move on to the next thing to pick on or criticize or whatever, you know. So, you know, this is how I navigated my life. I became completely scared of anything that had to do with the woods. Somebody might ask me, hey, we're gonna go up into the Cherryhala National Forest, and we're gonna fish for trout. We're gonna fish down the river, fish our way back down. And I'd always come up with a reason why I couldn't go. Oh man, you know, I can't go. My wife and I got something to do that day, but maybe next time. And I quit camping. You know, when I was a kid, I used to run around in the woods and play Tarzan, Cowboys and Indians, and Lone Ranger, and used to make my own bows and arrows and spears and you know, all that stuff. Well, after I had my Bigfoot encounter, all that stopped. My childhood ended. None of that stuff mattered anymore.
But you get out now and do things and research, right?
Oh yeah. You know, like I said, I came to a point in my adult life where, well, it was just kind of interesting how it happened. My son's 13 now, so he was however old he was then, 4, I guess, 3 or 4. And he was practicing for a church program, some kind of, I don't know if it was Easter or Christmas or something. And I was sitting in the pews watching them practice. It was not very many people in there, parents, you know, sitting around various spots of the church or the sanctuary. And I heard these two older guys talking behind me. And I wasn't eavesdropping. I just happened to catch the word. And one of the guys was he was retired, but he worked as a park employee, like a welcome committee, or a greeting, a courtesy team, or whatever you want to call them. Hey, you need anything, right. You know, that kind of thing. And he told me he told this other guy behind me how somebody had spotted a Bigfoot up at Indian Boundary Campground. Now, this is in Monroe County, Tennessee, East Tennessee, right on the foothills of the Cherokee National Forest. And so I heard these two old guys talking about some alleged Bigfoot encounter at this local campground, and something triggered something in my brain, and I started having these nightmares again. So here I am at 40 years old, waking up, screaming, sweating, scared of Bigfoot. And I said, I got to stop. I can't do this anymore. So I happened to be in my ex-wife, her and I are divorced now, pardon me. But at the time, she and I were in intense couples therapy. And when I say intense couples therapy, what I mean is, like, we'd go 3 days a week. I'd go one day and talk to the counselor. She'd go one day and talk to the counselor, and then we would go as a couple and talk to the counselor. And we did this very intense. Yeah, it was a difficult marriage. We're good friends now, but it was a difficult marriage. So on one of these individual sessions with the therapist, I speak up and I say, "Hey, look, I got to talk to you about something, and it has absolutely nothing to do with why we're here." So I proceed to go ahead and spill my guts to this therapist that, as a child, I saw a Bigfoot. I saw a mythological creature that everybody tells me isn't real, and I'm having problems. I have a residual traumatic nightmare type thing that I can't shake, and I need to talk about it because I'm tired of living in fear. So this guy, he was completely understanding. He told me I should maybe try to find somebody that's had similar encounters or has had a similar experience and talk about it with me. So for the first time ever, I went on to Google and Googled Bigfoot, and it led me to one place and then led me to a group on Facebook, and then it led me so on. And here we are 9 years later or whatnot, and now I camp. I go camping. I solo camp. Well, I take my dog with me. But what's interesting, and this is why I like to do these interviews, if anybody's ever heard me before, they'll tell you my story doesn't change. But, the reason I share these things is I don't want anybody to do what I did and go for years and years and years living in fear and damaging yourself, being self-destructive. I don't want, so, I decided to take a recovery approach with this. And so, I jumped in with both feet. And since then, all sorts of synchronicities have happened. When I embraced my experience for what it was almost as if my entire life fell into place. I came into the relationship of my life. I moved to Georgia, and then people that I had grown to become friends with. Well, like you, Johnny, I don't think I would have ever met you had I not moved to Georgia. Had I still stayed in Tennessee and stayed stuck where I was, I don't think you and I would have ever met. But when I decided to face my fears,
but now we have.
Yep, and it's just so many things have happened. I've got to meet Bob Gimlin. I've got to go camping with Bob Gimlin. I've been to several Bigfoot conferences. I've got to sit down and talk with everybody we know, the who's who of Bigfooting, everybody. I've talked to all of them. I've become friends with many of them. But the coolest thing for me is that, it's, as it's a fellowship of sorts. It reminds me very much of 12-step programs, of, Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. Not that I'm trying to equate those to Bigfoot, because you have enough problems being told that we're drunk when we see things like this, But the fellowship, when I can look at somebody who has had similar experiences, who has seen these things, and they know, you're either a believer or a non-believer. Well, I'm one of these. I feel like you're either a believer or you're a knower, and I'm a knower. I don't believe in these things. I know they exist. And, fortunately or unfortunately, it is what it is. And,
right.
And so
Jason,
I've come a long way. What's that?
I hate to cut you off there, but they're about to shut us down because we're about to go over our hour.
Okay.
So in the final couple of seconds here, do you have anything else you'd like to say? And man, I would love to get you back on here for a part 2 to this interview.
Absolutely. I'll be glad to come back anytime. I've got a group on Facebook. If you want to reach out to me, there's a group on there called Sequoia Sasquatch Society. You can find it. Reach out to me. I'm very friendly. If you feel like you want to talk to me about these things, you can. You can even criticize
make sure to share that on our page.
I don't listen to it much, but what's that?
And we'll share your page on our Facebook too, and let people be able to find it.
Absolutely. Yep. Go ahead. If you want to join, I can't remember if it's a closed group or an open group. Now I think it's a closed group. But it's very simple. I'll ask you a few questions. It's kind of like how Rick and Daryl shake people down. Have you killed anybody? I don't give them the same 3 questions, but I give them, what's your interest in my group? What brought you to the group? And where do you stand as far as the existence of these creatures? I have a few questions I ask, and if you ask the right question or answer the question correctly, you're in.
Well, that is fair enough. Well, I know it's time for Walking Dead, so you'll be wanting to get on to that in a few minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And but yes, I'd love to get you back for a part 2. And I guess we need to tell everybody that next week there's not going to be a show. We'll be out of town next week. And then when we come back on the 31st, we will have Lisa Lycan X, who has a group she calls the acronym LISA, stands for Lycan International Sasquatch Association. She'll be our guest on the 31st. But we would love to have you back, Jason.
No
yes,
problem.
Absolutely.
Anytime. You guys just holler at me and let me know when you'd like to do it, and I'm down.
Sounds good. Jason AC, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All righty, brother. You got anything to say in the last few moments?
No, I'm glad you said we'll be off next weekend. I'll be out of town also.
All righty, but we'll be back on the 31st and ready to go again. Jason, brother, we're so grateful to have you. Jason AC, glad you were with us tonight. Elijah, glad you were here too, son.
Hey, thank you.
And for everybody listening to me, I'm going to say it again, just stay groovy, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care, gentlemen.
Thank you, fellas.
Take care.
See ya.
Yep. See you.
Bye-bye.